Now, the pandemic is all but over, restrictions have been lifted and the world is ready to travel again. But if you want to visit the United States, it looks like you will have to wait. For now, put your American dream on hold till 2024. Why? Because as of the 28th of September, the waiting time for the visa appointment in New Delhi is 833 days. You heard that right. That is almost a 2-year wait for a visa appointment. The situation is not any better across the country. In all 5 US consulates, the average waiting time was 1.5 years. In New Delhi, as we said, the waiting time, 833 days. In the financial capital Mumbai, it's 848 days. In Kolkata, the waiting time is 767 days. Chennai, 780 days. And even in Hyderabad, which has the lowest waiting time, it says 582 days. The student visa waiting time is the same story. If you want a student visa appointment, you will still have to wait around 400 days. So why is the US visa crunch so bad right now? There are 2 main reasons here. One, pandemic disruptions. Washington halted almost all visa processing worldwide in 2020. In embassies, there was also reduced staffing. So clearly, the visas piled up. Second issue here, the demand is very high. Indians are eager to travel again. Many of them want to head to the United States. So there's a huge demand for visas right now. How does this waiting time now compare to other countries? In Shanghai, the waiting time for an appointment is 2 days. Let that sink in. In India, 833 days. In China, just 2 days. There are 3 reasons for that now. 1 is the lower demand. 2, the growing animosity between Washington and Beijing. And 3, zero COVID policies. But you have to admit, the difference is staggering here. In fact, the issue was raised in the recent Blinken-Jaishankar meet as well. The US Secretary of State pledged action to address India's concerns.
We have a plan when it comes to India to address the backlog of visas that's built up. I think you'll see that play out in the coming months, but it's something that we're very focused on. These connections, these people-to-people ties, whether it's students, whether it's business people, whether it's tourists, whether it's family, this is what really links us together. And the last thing we want to do is make that any more difficult. On the contrary, we want to facilitate it. So bear with us. This will play out over the next few months, but we're very focused on it.
Bear with us is what Blinken says. He mentions a plan but reveals no details about it. This backlog also reveals details about America's priority. If the demand for visas is high, it requires the embassy to invest more resources, perhaps by hiring more people or extending working hours. And remember, we're talking about a close strategic partner here. In fact, this goes beyond just visas. Joe Biden took office in January 2021, but he is yet to appoint an ambassador to India. The last US ambassador was Kenneth Juster. He vacated the post on the 20th of January last year. Since then, there have been 4 interim charge d'affaires, but no permanent ambassador. The Democrats nominated LA Mayor Eric Garcetti 8 months ago, but he hasn't gotten enough support to be appointed now. Just imagine that. America does not have an ambassador for one of its most important strategic partners. Neither can it approve visas in quick time. Tells you about their diplomatic shortcomings here. Now, for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has sent us this report from New York. Listen in.
Are facing significant wait time for visas. Some international travelers are having to wait up to 6 months or even more than a year just to schedule an appointment. The State Department blames restrictions and backlogs due to COVID-19. It's the worst it's ever been since 9/11. 2 years after the events of September 11th, a State Department official told a House committee hearing on visa services that the vast majority of our cases are completed within 3 weeks. That was considered to be a long time back then. Now, 2.5 years, 3 years into the COVID-19 pandemic, 3 weeks would almost seem like a miracle if many people could perhaps log in and try to get an appointment. In most cases, when Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with his counterpart from India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, they did discuss the challenges facing the residents of India regarding U.S. visas and trying to get an appointment. Blinken said that the U.S. has plans to address the situation in the coming months. Meanwhile, according to a U.S. official from the Chamber of Commerce, these delays also have a negative impact on the U.S. market and the U.S. economy and industry. Quote, on the ability of the businesses to grow, expand their operations, and generate new economic activity. After all, these businesses do rely on foreign workers, tourists, and others for their work. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
Now, for more on this, our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sethi, is joining us now from New Delhi. Siddhant, thank you for joining us. 833 days, Siddhant. What can you tell us about this? In fact, as I mentioned earlier, the United States has not appointed an ambassador to India that happens to be a very important strategic partner. What can you tell us?
Well, later today, there will be a kind of Facebook chat by a U.S. diplomat on the issue of consular services. Now, of course, the delay is something that is making international headline, but this is not just an India phenomena. It is across the world. In fact, it's across the Indian subcontinent. The delays in Dhaka is almost 400 to 500 days. Same stands true for Kathmandu, Islamabad and for Colombo. But that shows the surge in demand post the recovery we have seen when it comes to the COVID pandemic. In 2020, we know that restrictions were put by the US government on visa issuance. And since then, as the COVID pandemic abated, we know that the visas, the process has been started, but there is a backlog. Firstly, because of the lack of resources that has led to this backlog. But we need to understand the people-to-people linkages between India and the US. Let's talk about the students, because that section is the most worried section when it comes to their education. The delay stands at around 400 days. But the Indian students are one of the largest number of international students in United States. Almost 17% of all international students in United States are Indians, contributing almost $7 billion to the US economy. And of course, the number stands around 2 lakh Indian students in US for education. And that is the segment that's really worried to get a visa. But largely, as we know that earlier this week, the US Secretary of State mentioned that this is something they are really working on, and focus is that the backlog is something that is as soon as possible cleared. But if we talk about the ambassador, now it is something that is right now in a lot of bureaucratic issues, because we know that the ambassador designate is someone who has certain allegations, and unless that person withdraws from the race, another person cannot be appointed. But that is in fact essentially a position that of course gives a stronger India-US relationship. But it's not that his absence makes the relation go downwards. We know that there is strong linkages, high-level engagement. The Indian External Affairs Minister was in Washington, and we saw the welcome he got. I mean, if we compare with Pakistani Foreign Minister and the Indian Foreign Minister had number of engagements with the top echelons of the American politics. In fact, he had a meeting with the NSA, with the defense secretaries, and we know that it's just not a people-to-people relationship, it's a defense relationship. Right. It is also the strategic relationship, engagement in Quad, I2U2. That is something that has become key pillars of this important relationship.
Right. All right, Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us with all your inputs on this. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.